Welcome to Untying the Knot, your go-to podcast for all things divorce. We're here to share stories and strategies to help you untangle the knots in your divorce so you can navigate it with confidence and clarity and build the life you desire. I'm your host, Lisa Gu. So 5 years ago, my ex and I went to Costa Rica to check things out. We actually hired a real estate agent to tour us around. At the time, I had the vision in my mind that maybe in a couple of years we can work remotely. We both had good jobs. And then we had a small real estate business, which brings us some passive income. So it was my vision to be away from Canada maybe sometime and to explore it. Shortly after that, I was pregnant with our second child. I said, wait, great. This is going on that path. Little did I know that that was not his vision. So COVID hit and he told me that I don't want to be married with you anymore. So, and I came about this divorce journey, searching myself again. And so this past 4 to 5 years is me rediscovering myself and looking at my vision, but the realization is that how could I assume my vision of our family is also his vision? How could we not check in each other during our more than 10 years marriage and just assume that we go along with the plan? So that's why today we are here talking about leading our most important team, our family, with my coach Dave and his wife, Dr. Jen. And I really want to talk about how to cultivate the intimate long-term relationship with our partner. That's where Dave say, oh, then you have to bring Jen as well. So
yeah, it's not a conversation that I should just be having. Yeah, it takes two to tango on that. There's two sides to that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I got into coaching and knowing that I need to restart getting clear on my vision as a single mom with full custody with 2 kids in a corporate job and exploring a business, I knew I needed help from an amazing coach who knows cultivating excellence both on the intersection of personal and professional life. And that's why I reached out to Dave. So a little bit of background for those who you don't know, Dave is the author of Chief Family Officer and CEO of Threshold Leadership. And he is a business and family leadership coach. And a lot of people know and refer to him as the corporate therapist, which I thought, what a great way to summarize your role. And he's sought after for his expertise in strategy, communications, and managing high-stake relationships. And we also have Dr. Jen, and Dr. Jen is a naturopathic doctor. And that's a lot of people know her with a primary focus in pediatric health. She's also the founder and CEO of the Umbrella Project, a positive coping curriculum used internationally by thousands of parents, students, and educators. She's also an author of the book, The Umbrella Effect. So I actually attend, Dr. Jen, your webinar about ADHD because my son was going through the diagnosis, which was super helpful. A good reminder for me that there's nothing wrong with our kids, but how we approach things. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having it. Yeah, this is exciting.
What a treat. Awesome. We don't often get to do this, genocide, from
That's
you and
true.
I sharing our different perspectives, maybe over a glass with some friends. So when Lisa had suggested the idea of doing a podcast and sincere interest rather, just around these topics, I thought it'd be really a wholesome conversation if you were here a part of it. So thanks for being game for that too, Jen.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to talk about this topic because it's very near and dear to my heart for sure.
And I feel like today is a 360-degree review for Dave, and to check if he is walking the talk here. And
Yes.
It's so funny. Yeah, I told Dave, like, I know how to open the podcast, and then, life brings us. So we actually had a glitch of technology, and which firsthand I saw how you two interact in a timely situation. I was like, oh my God, how great we could see that So in the book, you talked about a specific scene that jumped out for me is that Jen was on mat leave with William, and you were working, and you came home and saw the mess speak, and you were impatient. And then Jen, I think, put a sticker note and reminded you it's not what you look at matters, it's what you see. And that's 4 years ago, because I know William is almost the same age as the COVID baby too, similar as my daughter. And then I think about a month ago, we were on a coaching call at lunchtime. You said, oh, Lisa, I need to stop because Jen is passing by and she's waving at me and blowing kisses at me. And then you stepped away, turned off the camera, and then I don't know how long later you came back. And you're like, oh, it's good. So I don't what happened there because it was off. So I just want to ask you, tell us this journey, because I think a lot of people, when they have kids, they can relate, right? We have one breadwinner, and there is some expectation of what our partner should be doing, taking care of the kids at home, and some impatience and frustration. To here today, 4 years later, and I can feel the love and energy even from off screen. So tell us about that journey.
Jen, where do you want to start on that one? I mean, I think as you talk about a journey, I almost feel like I would respectfully want to reframe it as a practice, because I think it's something that we continue. We, at that point in time, were transitioning into a very different stage of our life where we were resetting our roles in the home in the way that we each contributed as a result of Will. Yet again, we're kind of resetting our roles now as we go into another really interesting transition. You know this firsthand, Lisa. We're moving to Spain in the fall, and we now are living with Jen's mom, my mother-in-law, Brenda, which is amazing and a great gift for the summer and a new environment, which just means that there is so much exposure to doing things go unnoticed and forms of to come to life, I think, in any relationship when you go through those types of transitions, because fundamentally the way you used to get appreciated or contribute is no longer perhaps the way that's required or needed, or maybe the circumstances where it can be recognized or you feel appreciated might change. So I think it really is a practice for us, but one that I think honey, we've done a really good job, I would say, always evaluating our experience together. And as we go through those transitionary periods, I think by evaluating them, not just from, did we get all the things done, but more like, what are we learning about you and me and us and our family through these moments? It allows us to continue to get better and better and kind of build some momentum in that direction. Wouldn't you agree, Jenny? Like you said, are we living 1 year repeated 10 times or 10 great years? And I think evaluating that experience is so important for us to continue.
Yeah. And I think actually it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I think in that time, which I would say was probably the most difficult time of our marriage, as many difficult times are, it wasn't just having Will. There were a lot of things going on at that time. They were kind of piling up, just one challenge after another. And we weren't doing the check-in practices and the recentering with each other that we usually were doing. And it became a real relationship breaker for us, I think. Like, it was almost like not doing that practice that was so familiar to us is, I think, at the crux of why that time was so hard for us, is just we weren't checking back the way we needed to be. And then I really feel like that is something that's changed. So, now we're living with my mom for a couple of months, and lots of added stresses and changes and things to navigate. But now I can really feel how on top of those check-ins we are, and how on top of syncing up and talking about it. So everything feels so much more manageable. We can roll with it. We still feel a lot of connection. I think that's how I feel about it. But that time particularly, and I think it happens in a lot of relationships where time starts to be really difficult to find. The more stressed out you are, the less you feel like sitting down with your partner and resyncing and, talking about what's going on, or you're having the same conversation over and over again. It's like banging your head against the wall, but you're not doing that high level regroup. So I think that was really a huge part of what that stress ultimately was for us at that time. And, but yeah, where we got back on track too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're so right, Jen. Like with things being so busy, if I think, and even today, with working through some of the challenges that we will always have, I'll evolve. It's so much easier for me just to go out and play in the pool with Will than to sit down and have to talk about the stuff that we haven't had time to talk about. It's so much easier to go and kick a ball out front with Caleb and Quinn instead of sitting down and talking about all the shit that we don't want to talk about, especially at the end of a day like that, right? So I think one thing that we've done really well is we've started to have those conversations at different times in the day, earlier in the day, when we have more capacity for them, or we've built in some mechanisms in our family that create conversations not happening. Right. In my book, I say, don't work on the plumbing when it's raining. And I think we're continuing to get better and better about finding opportunities to talk about those things when we actually have the capacity and it's not happening.
Yeah. And if we're being transparent here, Lisa, I know you want a 360 on Dave. Working on the plumbing when it's raining is not your strongest skill. You are a guy who needs to reflect. We've had many an argument where I'm like, what are you talking about? This doesn't even make any sense anymore. But then as soon as you get some space to think about it, you always come back with a very, not just a resolution, but a level up on what the conflict was, more than I could ever hope to hear about what you had reflected on. But you are not a good plumber when it is raining. Do not call.
Do not call him. When my face,
Those conversations are not your strength, right? You need that period of reflection. You need to come back and have those conversations later. So.
Yeah, and I think that right there is a good example of you integrating the ongoing understanding that you're continuing to build about me into the way that you interface with our family system and create the environment where healthy repair can happen. Because as good as your intentions have been in the early parts of our relationship, when that rupture would happen and the pipes would blow for whatever reason, right? You and I are very different. I'm more like, give me my space. And you're definitely more like, no. Like, can we figure this out now? I just want to have assurance on things, right? And we both have the similar intention of we want to do the thing that we feel is most appropriate for us in that moment. And I think what we've learned is what that looks like for each other. And then how do we start to do what's right for the relationship, not just us and what we have next. And I think your ability to spot, even in recent years of like West, you've just learned that like, it's great to get me engaged in that process, but just not when the water's flying. Right. And learning to kind of wait for the tank to run dry, if you will. And I've had to learn how to do that in a respectful way too, right? Where it's not just stomping around in the water and leaving and walking out. That's not what's happening. But I think that's just a great reflection of how evaluating our experience together and what we're learning about us, and not just the actual event that took place, but how we relate through those has been really critical to that. And I think it's critical to a lot of folks who get better at the repair process. Because like you said, I'm pretty good at the disruption piece, right? And the blowout piece. And I think that's not what we actually want to have less of. Well, I think over time that goes down. Really, it's starting to strengthen up capacity for more thoughtful repair.
Yeah, I think something that. I've really seen and learned along the way is that if you really are evaluating your experience, so I spent 10 years now evaluating conflict with Dave and how that goes. If you really take the time to pay attention to the experience, I can now feel much less anxious in those moments when we have an acute conflict. I used to, as we all are responding to our own emotional experience in those moments, I would seek Dave to resolve the conflict very quickly because I was anxious, and I wanted everything to be better. And now it's so much easier for me to walk away and go on with my day and not feel that same anxiety, because I know and I trust Dave. I've evaluated long enough in him that he will come back and resolve the conflict, or he will take the time to think about it, right? And then come back with some wisdom or some thoughtfulness on his part. So I think that's another like big part of evaluating your experience too, is being able to reduce some of the stress that you live day to day with, or your pre-existing patterns from other people. I'm sure you can probably speak to some of the patterns you have now in relationship because of, the experience with your ex. It's so easy to just drag those along to the next instead of really
carry
evaluating
your luggage into the new relationship.
Instead of taking the time to be thoughtful about the new experience you're having with somebody different and build the trust. So.
Yeah. I love this so much. And one thing is that at work, right, every year we do an annual review. And in some companies, so we do a quarterly review evaluation. And we never do that in our relationship. It's just assume, it's just the same. It will go well. And as you were talking about this experience from 5 years ago to now, I can feel how calm and you feel. So as you were talking, I can sense this, because Dave, I am similar to Jen. When we are disconnected or in an intimate relationship or a conflict, like I want to seek, right? I'm that you or most gentlemen. I'm more like island. I want to just shut down, take my time. The more my partner does that, the more seeking I wanted to do, and the more anxious I get. But just knowing that at that moment for me is that I'm disconnected in this seeking action, in seeking. What needs to happen for me is actually not connecting with my partner, but connecting with myself. And then I can come back, but also evaluating a history. Okay, did he come back to understand that, maybe he just needed a little bit of time, rather than with my ex, I would be like, talk to me. Yeah. And what a
because
terrible
you had
way
to. Right.
Yeah. Because he's disengaging. He was just, so this is also a great segue to talk about conflict. What I understand as I explore a little bit, post-divorce and dating, is that it's not that the couple don't fight. It's how we come back to the fight that matters, and what's the mechanism, what you learned, how does that piece evolved in your 10-year relationship, repairing. Even just now, before we started the podcast, we had a little bit like a snippet of that, because Jen's technology wasn't working and it took us some time to get work, and Dave went to help, and I sense that the energy there's shifting a little bit. So tell us.
I would say from that experience specifically, and then I'll let Dave, you talk to your experience in that moment too. The biggest shift in me over the last 10 years or so is not feeling like I need to fix Dave's irritability with me, that my technology is not working. Like, it's no secret. I mean, I'm 13 years older than him, puts me in a demographic that if something goes wrong with my technology, I'm probably going to be able to fix it, but it's going to take me 20 minutes and the podcast is starting in 1 minute. So Dave clearly is irritated with that, which is his experience. Before, previous Jen would really feel like I just needed to fix that or apologize or get all flustered. Current Jen just feels like, okay, you're irritable. We can just move through that. We don't need to, there's not much I can fix there, nor do I need to, nor is it a real problem that you're irritated with me. It's fine, But I think that comes from the amount of time that Dave and I spend reconnecting with each other, the amount of time we spend having family meetings where we just sit down and openly talk about like, hey, what's working for you? How are you feeling overall? So that I know that irritability isn't a sign of something else deeper that's wrong or contempt building up or something like that. I feel like those kind of base camp style check-ins that we do often, and we'll usually go to like a nice restaurant and have a glass of wine and just check in, and stuff comes up there, but I know that it's clearing along the way. There's not all this stuff in this space where Dave's reaction of irritability now feels like, is something really wrong? Do I not know what's going on? Is this a bigger thing? So I feel like for me, that is the biggest change, is not that we're all roses all the time. I mean, he didn't come up with a glass of wine and like, no problem, honey, let me fix this for you. You know, he was like, what the heck? Why didn't you do this 20 minutes ago? Right? Like, what are you thinking? You think you can fix this in a minute now? Right? Like, and that's okay though. Like, that seems like the right reaction, and I can just let him have that. So that's sort of where I'm at. I don't know, Dave.
I
what
love
do you think?
it so much. And before Dave, you jump in, is that this lesson I'm learning too, is that it's not personal. I'm not taking it personally. It's not about his irritability, is about him, and it's on him. And I do not need to fix that. Oh my God, the desire to fix things is real.
Yeah.
And then we kind of move ourselves away from the situation a little bit, detaching a little bit, and then we can gain space. It's like, okay, it's not a, and he can walk through that. It's also your trust of him working through his inner. And so I love it so much, Dave.
Yeah, I'd say just one thing to add to Jen's piece. I think like what I was going to actually ask, like, how do you think you've got there? But you, I think, spoke to that quite well, Jen. One thing that I've experienced over the last few years with you is more active attempts to like make sure you understand without like trying to. If I think back into the early, I think a lot of times what would happen is I would get frustrated on something, and then what would begin to take place is a series of compensatory behaviors from you to try and get in front of anything else that's going to make me even more irritated, which now starts to like take away from all the things that you're doing. But it was very much like, how would I say it? Well, you were taking side streets and like going down in the shadows to clean things up in order to create an environment where you think by doing that, I would be able to settle down, not be bothered, and hopefully like resolve. I think, well, now I think you're in a spot where there's just a lot of trust in knowing that allows us to have interactions like we did moments ago in a way where it's just clean and as simple as it is, and we can kind of move on right away. There was an intermediate, I think, phase where I noticed a lot of times you like checking in, like, am I getting this right? Is that what's going? Okay, cool. Like, but like you actually double checking and just directly addressing it instead of trying to do things to hopefully reduce the risk of that getting worse. Does that make sense? So I think there was like a whole like progression there that was really, really helpful. I think one of the things that has helped me a lot in the way that we deal with conflict together is understanding the difference between like when Jen and I are in conflict between each other and when we are, and how you and I repair conflict between you and I when we disagree on something between us, or how we treated each other or what had taken place. There's a big difference between that and then also realizing that we can become skilled at how we work together in dealing with a third. A third could be one of our kids. A third can be one of our parents. A third can be a challenging neighbor or thing that's happening in our community. In particular, I've noticed that we're getting better at dealing with thirds and treating how we deal with those in a different way compared to how we deal with shit that we have going on between us anyway, right? And like to me, that's a very different skill. And to realize like, wow, like even when back during COVID, like you said, we had Will, but there was a bunch of other things that were going on in our family too, where many of them I would describe as a third person or a third thing that we both really care about was going through something. And we had to find a way to work together and use our system to try and, collectively improve the thing that we had cared about. And that's just different than how we fight together, right? It's a very different context. And I think the time that we've spent understanding the difference between those two have really helped, I think, come to the moment with the right intentions and the right context of like knowing that that's what we're actually up against instead of just consciously sharing our own perspectives and fighting back and forth on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It feels so nice to have somebody on your team. And I think that's essentially what, when you think about the world like that, it's like, hey, we're on the same team here trying to deal with this. You might think I'm defending or you're doing this, but actually what we're both trying to do is come to something together to help whatever this piece is or cope with this. So it is a nice moment to remember that you're on the same team. It comes up a lot actually with teenagers too and parents where sometimes it can feel like parent versus teen instead of like parent and teen versus the fact that you're really irritable. Like it's us versus your irritability. Do you know what I mean? And like trying to even like be on the same team to deal with the thing, or like you're not very good at controlling your anger. That can be a third, right? The quality that you're both working on doesn't have to be me versus you. It can be like, hey, you and I are working together on the fact that you're a really irritable teenager and you snap every time. So we can like strategize together about that thing. And I find that's a really helpful parenting tool too, because, or very helpful relationship tool too, because it can put you both acknowledging that there's something you're working on together, you know, but there's still, it's not you.
A team.
It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not
when you bring up,
yeah, exactly.
When you bring up the notion of team, I immediately start to think there are some of the best ways that we've worked as a team to try and improve conflict skills. And one of the things that I, looking back on, definitely can see quite clearly is a lot of times with us, and I'm sure this is, I know this is with every other relationship too, more often than not, it was the nonverbal cues and gestures that would happen so quickly and so unconsciously that it would immediately throw either of us into like a predetermined understanding of what somebody or doing. And we have worked really well together as a team, I think, to help understand by looking back at those experiences, like what is the thing that I do that immediately sets you off like that? And realizing through that, like for me, I know when I say things like absolutes, like always or never, it's one of those things that I've learned you're very sensitive to. That in my mind, I'm thinking, well, it's not absolutely always, but you know what I mean? It's like most of the time. But for you, you're like, well, no, you said always. And so always is always, right? And I just use that as a silly example because it could be a look. It could be a gesture. It could be a sound. It could be like, there's so many things that aren't verbal. I think we've worked as a team to uncover what those are. And by understanding what those are, we've been able to smooth out, I think, some of those friction points that a lot of times I think in relationship, we don't realize have the fucking impact that they do. Right.
And something I think I could get better at, I think most people could get better at, is instead of trying to smooth them out as if they shouldn't happen, giving people a little more patience in the journey, even of a conversation. Like I can say something to Dave and I instantly know what he thinks of what I've said. And he knows the same for me. So sometimes conflict, old historical conflict, comes from like, you're doing that thing again. I know, you'll bring up something about one of the kids, Dave, and you can see in my face that I don't agree with that point. And then you're instantly into the mode of like, oh, you're going to defend the kids and you're going to be not on my side on this conflict. And then it just kind of spirals without any real even engagement from me, other than the fact that we've been together long enough that you know what I'm thinking, and vice versa. It happens both ways, right? So I also think there is something everybody could do a little bit better in relationship is just allow the person to have their emotional journey through the conversation, and their immediate reactions without assuming that that's where they're going to land at the end of the conversation. I can have my immediate reaction to want to defend the kids, but then I can also loop in all the other information. Okay, I'm trying not to immediately do that. What does Dave have to say? Okay, I'm trying to just be present and listening to his side. I can have that, but if already the conversation has taken a turn to conflict because you can sense that my first reaction is the one you don't like, that's hard too, right? So I think, again, it's like that patience, allowing people to have a journey through a conversation that you don't need to respond to at every moment. Just being kind of curious, watching them go through their journey too in the conversation.
And especially when you're in a long-term relationship, you kind of you think you know each other so well. So you assume. The assumption is very dangerous. I think Dave and I, even when I share some of my personal experience, I realize it's like our ability to almost have a third eye to look at ourselves through our reaction and our assumption and even judgment of our intimate partner, and assume that's what they mean, but not realizing, I think, Dave, we talked about, we go through different iterations of our relationship. and the other person is growing, I'm growing, or am I allowing that space for even growth or the ability to recognize the growth, the change? And assumption we do, especially the longer you are together, the more.
Yes,
that's a
the
great
story gets
reminder.
hardwired. It's kind of back to the original story you shared about it's not what you look at that matters, it's what you see. Is that sometimes we see our partners through a certain lens, and it's so difficult for them to get themselves out of that story because our story is so powerful about them. Everything, every example, and I think you share this, Dave, really well in your book, everything starts to validate. So you only see the things that validate what your brain wants to believe, which is this one narrative and path, instead of being able to allow the space for change, or just a different story to be true too.
Yeah. And you spoke to I believe one of my greatest strengths over the years has been reflecting on my behavior. I think it's definitely one of the, I would say, superpowers that I bring to our relationship is that I'm, albeit not maybe great when the water blows, when I do leave, I do really think about it. And I really do come back, like you said, Jen, with an upgraded perspective and an ability to take some ownership. And one of the questions that I often ask in that space when I'm alone to myself is like, could it be possible there's a different way of describing this? And that, to me, by just opening up multiple possibilities and being able to, almost like a Mad Lib, like, let's write the story again, but just differently, is a way that I think opens up the door and the wedge for different stories to be possible there, right? And that's just one that's always kind of been with me when I take and try and look at, like, what have I given here? What am I taking here? And what pain and trouble am I causing here? Right? And through that, like, could it be possible that my original story about what this is meaning or what's taking place is expired, is old, if it's right? But just inviting the possibility, I think, is an important piece, like you said, Jen, to those stories. Because at the end of the day, like, I think part of being in partnership is to create the conditions where a partner can do whatever they want to do as far as becoming who they want to become. Right. And like leading into that. And I think what you're highlighting really well, Jen, is sometimes while our intentions are there, when we get under stress, we can be really good as partners of keeping our, partners where they were instead of helping them get to where they want to. Right.
Yeah. I think a big part of that, and I feel like divorce is a really great example of this. Often, sometimes our stories are protecting. They're like wrapped around something painful that we don't want to let go of, right? So many people's story about their divorce is often like, my partner's a horrible person. They did all these things to me. But it's like, it's wrapped around the pain of whatever has transpired and, whatever those things are on our own side of that story too. So I think sometimes when we have those really hard, rigid stories about our partners, they're actually like a protective mechanism for ourselves. And I think, Dave, like in your book, I think you share some of this too, but that story you had about me at that time when Will was a baby and me not contributing enough or whatever, that story was also very much protecting you from some of the deeper layers that you didn't want to deal with at that time, right? Or that were hard for you to look at in the mirror. So that story is an easier way to just put that away, somewhere you don't have to look at it. So I often, I take great care when unraveling people's stories because underneath them, there's often some pain that needs to be dealt with and processed too. Yeah.
That's so true. So when I get in touch with my clients going through divorce, and myself included, and not realizing is that I was holding a lot of pain bodies within. And then as you were talking, I was like, so through the divorce settlement journey, right? Because it's high conflict. It couldn't be higher, the conflict. And we tend to reinforce the negative stories about the other person. I mean, how could we not? Because the conflicts, and it's important to step back and to have someone, whether it's mediator, your lawyer, or coach, to really challenge you, just like Dave did, to have some space and asking you, is it true? Is it absolutely true? Or whatever questions we're asking to challenge our assumptions or our old stories about that person, which is very hard at this
It
time.
is.
But it can also be if during your divorce you couldn't have that space to do that, definitely take some time to do that post-divorce, because that will help your next relationship. And if you choose to get in.
Yeah, and you don't want to carry those with you. And many people do for a long time.
Yeah. And when we get through the same cycle and wondering, right, how and why, and that's why our second marriage divorce rate is even higher, maybe, I don't know, 70, 80%. So do the work now so that, we don't get to that point. And also another thing is that I think Dave's work and myself is that really the work is focusing on ourselves rather than externally pointing finger to the other party, because whatever the other party did or, is still doing, it doesn't matter. Is that what do you want? What kind of life do you want it to lead? And what kind of family do you want it to lead?
Yeah. And I think like the ability to turn within a little bit and to kind of ask yourself, like, what's really going on here in those moments? What's the story that I have? Where did that come from? I think it's important, the role of timing on that. Right. And being really quick to do that. What I mean is, like, you ever bad cough and then you finally bring them to the right? You know how fucking annoying that is? Like, you book the appointment because, like, you have the symptoms, and all of a sudden you get to the doctor and, like, there's no fucking symptoms. But I swear to God, his throat hurt yesterday. Can we still do it? Right? Like, it's one of those where, like, when the pain is there.
That happens, like, 50% of the time in pediatric visits.
Yeah.
Parents like, I swear.
They get sick on a Saturday when the doctors are off, right?
Yeah.
And then Monday, you got the perfect fine. Can you give me that anti-pink juice antibiotics? No, you don't need it.
Prescribe it because tomorrow it's going to be back once we leave this office. But anyway, sorry, I know it's an allergy, Dave, but I just wanted to validate that is a very real thing that happens in pediatric visits. It is the bane of many parents
all the time.
My gosh, yeah.
And I think the bane of why it's so frustrating is because, like, the symptom is no longer presenting itself, which is making it more or less hearsay, and it becomes more difficult to have a objective, very clear and present moment understanding of what's going on. And the types of things and the way that we behave, the way that I behave when I'm under stress, and my story, be it a true or more often than not a false one kind of coming through that I'm projection, it's really difficult to evaluate that thoughtfully and to really be honest around, what am I actually feeling about you right now? Where, how do I actually feel about you? What actually happened? There's a window where the wire is live. Now's the time to actually look at that. And I often say that use pain as a tool. Don't wait for the pain to go away. Don't wait to go see the doctor when you're not in it anymore. Some of my favorite things to receive are the Wednesday night phone calls at 7 p.m. from one of my clients who is just totally blown, going for the walk. And I love it is because it's not because, I don't love it because it's happening at 7 p.m. and I should be hanging out and want to be hanging out with my family. I love it because real time. It's the symptom is right there. We can examine it right in that moment. And I just see that one's ability to really connect with it, to understand it, is so much deeper when it is live, real happening. And we have the courage to, if not ask our partner, ask somebody else, be it a best friend, be it a coach, be it a trusted partner in your life, to say, can you sit with me and talk about this with me right now? Right? As it's actually happening. I think that's such an important piece.
Timing. It's everything. I think it's also relevant. And I've been working through some really internal turmoil in the past week. And I've been checking in with Dave, keeping him updated, but also just even allowing myself to sit in it. And so discomfortable, and lots of tears and reflection and frustration. Why can't I pull myself out of it? And just really allowing that timing to come, and also reaching out to some trusted. So I just want to add this quote here in your book, in this part about conflict. I think we talked a lot about intention, self-awareness, and you said change comes from choice, and choice comes from conflicts. I think that really tie up well with what we've been talking. And I love that. It's a choice that we can make. How do we repair things? with our intimate partners and other people in our life, but also within ourselves. So thank you for sharing. And the next question, I told Dave, it came through my silent meditation retreat on Saturday, and I really wanted to ask is, you two are both very busy. You have 3 children. Well, and Jen is a doctor. She also has her business. And Dave, you two, you're doing different ventures. So how do we balance our identity of self and our identity of this in this intimate partnership or this family? So there are different aspects of it, right? We're independent humans because you both have your identity. And then we're also dependent. Like there is Dave is going to show up. We're also interdependent to do things together with the kids or something else. So in your life, in your relationship, how do you balance all of these pieces of being yourself and your role in the family between being independent, dependent, and
sorry, Dave, do you mind if I jump in first here? Or?
Fire away.
You look like you're taking a breath to speak.
No, just surviving. Just breathing.
Just breathing. Okay, good. Good news.
This lengthy question from Lisa, just breathing through it.
No, yeah. I think mine is a very not a lengthy answer to this. And this has definitely been an evolution over the last little while for me, is that I think we have a false sense of identity as if it's this stable thing. I am like this. I am like this. This is who I am in relationship. And really, in reality, it's changing all the time, day to day, moment to moment. And there needs to be room for identity to change, right? So when I am struggling the most with all the pieces in my life, what I try to do is to get more in the moment with whatever it is that I'm doing at that time. So if I'm with Dave, I try to really just be there in that moment in my identity as like a connected person to him. Or if I'm playing tennis and I'm anxious and I'm thinking about some conflict I had earlier with the teenagers or something, I'm just like, right now, I'm just a tennis player. I'm just somebody who likes to learn tennis. And I try to like go back to that moment to moment identity versus this much bigger picture of identity that can feel very complex, especially when things are busy. When things aren't very busy and there's a lot of time for reflection, it feels different. But when life is really busy and there's a lot of moving pieces, I try to get more into the moment is how I balance the different pieces of my identity. Like when I'm changing hats now and I need to like let that piece go and now be in this piece.
Love it.
Yeah. That's really interesting, Jen, especially like a personal level, how you read that. I was thinking about the question a bit differently, more at like how do we continue to support one another to have the capacity to pursue our individual vocations and interests, be them business or otherwise, and also fulfill our commitments to our children and to ourselves at a level that we're proud of and that we truthfully expect of. To me, I think, and for us, I'm sure the answers to this would change and does always change over time. But, my book, I talk about what does winning mean? And fundamentally, it's like, what is really important to us? What do we believe in? And I think that's something in a relationship that can very easily be like implied that we get it. You kind of highlighted this, Lisa, with your story right at the beginning of our time together with your partner and living abroad and wanting to have a different lifestyle, right? It's easy, especially when we have the like honeymoon phase of a relationship where we're courting one another and we're dreaming and we're sharing those types of things, to think that just continues and is going to remain steadfast throughout a relationship, right? But context is always changing. And so I would say that one foundational piece that we've agreed on very explicitly from the time that we got together was that our own like sovereignty as individuals really, right? And like being able to like fundamentally believe that like something that we're committed to is making sure that each of us are supported to go and pursue the things that are calling us. And even right now, I would say that I'm more in a phase of my life where I am maybe disproportionately in more of an exploration mode than Jen is right now in areas. And but we know that's something we both believe in and support each other in, right? Just like other kind of values, if you will, that are like kind of household values for how we think about or make decisions on those types of things. And I think that's important because when it comes down to, I think back to June, this last month that just passed away, I was gone for probably 15 days there on work.
Yeah.
At the beginning of that, I also was away for an additional 7 days on a retreat, which has nothing to do. I'm not money when I'm gone. I can make the argument that I'm going to be, more calm and a better parent and a better partner when I come home from retreat. But truthfully, I'm doing this to explore my own interest and spirit and what that looks like for me. And it's something that's not a deal breaker or a type of conversation that we fight around or argue about when it comes up, because we've already predetermined that we support each other in those types of things. So by kind of making agreements around what is important to us up front before actually getting into the week or the month or what's kind of happening, I think those things starts to act as like almost design constraints, and we expect those things to be there. And it's like, okay, it's more about how might we make that happen instead of not again, right? Like something like that, and the full support that we offer each other, I think is something that we, predetermine on that. And I think that's a principle that's really worked well for us, is just in principle taking a prehab approach to some of these types of things. Create mechanisms that spark these types of conversations informally or formally, so that when the pipes burst or when you're actually in real life, right, you've already kind of got on the same page for some of these things that sometimes can seem phony and silly, like values and a company on the wall. They're very different when your family values and the big things that you've agreed on really matter to how you want to live your life together. Right. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that's how we also make it work a little bit at a family level, is just always talking about what those things are now. And especially when we go through transitions, like even this summer here at Nana's in Spain, or have they changed? Those are really
the question I usually ask myself that really comes down to is like, am I helping Dave live his best life as a partner? That I think is the quality that we're both committed to, is not changing Dave to live our best life, but like, am I helping Dave live his best life in the definition of that for him? And likewise, is he doing the same for me? And I personally, the hardest part for that for me is that I'm not as good at asking for my own things. Dave is very good at being like, I want to go to this retreat. This is important to me. And then I'm going to be traveling for work, and you can make that work. Right. I'm less good at being like, now I want to do this, and now I want to do this. And can you cover me on all these things? So one of the things that I've started doing, I heard a great speaker talking about manifesting the life that you want. And one of the components that he talked about was imagining that like giving and receiving is a guitar string, and it needs to be perfectly in tune in order to be able to manifest what you want. And you need to be constantly thinking about pulling that guitar string into perfect tunes. Most mornings I'll do a meditation where I really check in with myself. Am I giving? Am I receiving? Is that string actually in tune, or am I taking a lot more than I'm giving? Or do I feel like I'm giving a lot more than I'm taking, because those pieces need to align? So that's been a simple way for me to just make sure that I'm asking for myself and giving in a way that is like in tune in our relationship. Otherwise, those are the easy spots for resentment to start to build, or you start to feel like I'm doing everything, you're off doing your own life. That has to be in balance. And so that's been super helpful for me too, just like a simple daily check-in point to really think about how I'm giving and receiving, and whether that feels like it's tuned.
I love that, Jen. And I like how it kind of illustrates the giving and taking, the two sides of that coin of, am I helping Dave live his best life? And am I helping myself live mine? Right. And where do we feel on that? There's a big difference between a good giver and a doormat giver. Right. And I think, especially in a context of a family, when you have kids watching these, yeah, we could talk about what we want to leave our kids, like in a will or in a trust and all those types of things. But I think what you and I are definitely on the same page around is what type of kids do we want to leave, right? And I want to leave kids who are really good givers and who are also able to create the conditions for themselves to be able to live a life that brings them into an experience of themselves that is contagious for others and is positive for others and allows them to be an example of what's possible, that makes a positive impact in wherever they're living just because of who they are, right? And that's if we're not taking for ourselves and we're just over giving. And for some people, it's the opposite. They're taking way too much and not giving at all. I just love those two questions like you highlighted there, Jen. Am I helping Dave live his best life? And am I helping myself? Right?
Yeah. I think, Lisa, that really interestingly comes back to your point about turning in and like the things that you can do for yourself versus externalizing everything. There was a time when I could easily have externalized that onto Dave, right? Like, I'm helping you live your best life. Look at all the things I'm doing for you. How are you helping me? Do something different, Dave. But truthfully, I've never, ever found that to be an effective strategy, even though I've tried it many times. Always what's been the most effective is when I actually tune into my own power and my own choice. So the experience that Dave and I had when we had Will and we were in a lot of conflict, like near divorce level of conflict, one of the thing that changed the trajectory of our relationship was a moment that I had when I was like 18 months postpartum, constantly trying to convince Dave and show him how he was treating me and how he wasn't seeing what I was doing. And like, I felt like we were both just constantly, you're doing it like this. Can't you see, change what you're doing? Eventually, one day I just said, you know what? I don't want to be this person anymore. I'm done with this person. I'm done with this stage of life. I'm not going to change our relationship by convincing Dave to do something different so that I feel like more attracted to him or whatever. I'm only going to change myself. And who do I want to be? I want to be a person who is growing in my business. I want to be a person who is enthusiastic and happy. I want to be a person who loves sex again. And I'm just going to be those things. And I started like literally one day, I was like, nope. Okay. I'm just that person now. I'm not going to be this person anymore. I just made a choice. And after a week, Dave was like, well, this is really nice, but this isn't going to last. And I was like, no, you don't know, because I tapped into the power that I had to be who I want to be. And then Dave just responded in kind and he changed. Within a month, we were like two different people. It was the craziest transition I've ever experienced, or understanding of what it means to be in your own personal power and stop saying like, well, I don't really want to have sex because I don't like how you're treating me. You're too angry. Like that's not attractive. So we're just going to carry on as we were, just being like, nope, that's it. Different person now. Here we go. And wouldn't you say, Dave, that was like, it was very interesting to watch what power that has to affect somebody around you. You change your energy and the people around you have to respond differently. They can't stay the way they were because it's not the same interaction anymore.
Yeah, I think fundamentally it's a very good applied example of the choice that have to be. We have no more anger. Great. Yeah. So then we can do these things and we can have sex more frequently. And then we can be in this type of relationship where I can be this type of person. Right. And instead of like waiting to have those types of things in order to be that type of person, you may be that, right? Which seems so simple, but it's not. Like, right? Like it's not. Yeah. And it is at the same time. Like I think we all have this quality in ourselves to be able to, much like the alter ego, like I talk about in the book, right? Enclothed cognition with kids. Great research where they had kids go and do these puzzles. And they would be testing to see their tenacity and their persistence. And the trick is there was no actual solve to the puzzle, the bastards, right? So they just had the kids continue to put the effort in, they were timing them. As soon as they put on a scientist lab coat, right? Or a police officer or a superhero outfit, immediately they invoke the cognition or the way of being of somebody else. And I think what that just reminds me is we all have the ability to tap into different qualities that are always there. And even though the dynamic in the relationship may make it difficult to pull those out because of resentment, fundamentally, we're giving away power when we allow that to be the excuse. And we take back power, we make the choice to be able to be that person because that's who we want to be. And I think what's really interesting here, Jen, is by you making that choice, it forces I made what I believe was the right positive choice in that I met you there. That would have just put our relationship on a different pathway. And I'm a firm believer that like it would have been the total right move for you to do that for you because that's how you want to live. That's who you want to be. And if I wasn't willing to be able to come along with that, great. That is a wonderful choice that has forced a bigger decision in our relationship together of should we stay or should we go? And that's fine. Yeah. That's great. That's a good decision to be able to get to, but one that's not available when we're like dicking around and trying to compensate and trying to change other people, right? Like it's an empowering position to be in when you make that choice and you now allow somebody else to make their own choice rather than trying to convince them.
Yeah. And I think maybe that's why those moments are so hard to come to, because you do have to get to the point where you say, this is who I want to be with or without you. And I'm going to be that person.
Yep.
And if you don't come along with me, then I've made the decision before I've made the decision that I'm going to live this life now. So that I think is sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
No, sorry. I just say it's so good. I'm just saying, hallelujah. It's so powerful. So powerful when you come with that kind of energy. It's like, this is, I made my choice. You can come along or not. I will be at peace. Because I've made my choice. And I've, whether you're in this divorce stage and you're still very painful, hoping the other person really ultimately, when you're in conflict during that stage, like see you and recognize you, and the other person refused to. And, or I have clients who are age. Dave, we talk about, should I stay or should I leave? Because my marriage has been on autopilot. There is no really intimacy. I don't feel loved, right? And a lot of people still, we talk about externally pointing finger, like if he changes, only if she does this, we will be different. As you making that choice, like I don't care if you change or not, because I cannot change you. I've realized that the only person that can change is myself, and that's really powerful. And no matter what happens, and you know that you will be fine. I do want to ask this question because it seems like you just made that decision. It's like, bam, it happened. And I can totally understand how that energy shift influence Dave to really, Dave, now you have a choice. First, he has questions like, is this last? Second, he said, and then when he realized this is real, he has decided to meet you. So for a lot of people, they're in that stage. They know it's not working. They want to change. They want to make that shift, but they don't know how. And how did... it sounds like it's like, bam, Jen is going to change, and Jen changed. So what advice do you give people in that kind of still not sure stage, but there is an inkling voice that they know is not working?
Yeah. I think sometimes this is more maybe on the female side, but I'm sure men experience this too. Sometimes part of it is stepping back and thinking about, who do I want to be if this relationship doesn't work out? Who am I? Like, what are the qualities? If I could start fresh, what would I do and what would I not do? Would I have allowed, do I want to be in another relationship where I'm constantly asking if everything's okay? Or would that just be no, like I'm done with that? Would I be a person who, right? And then imagining what that person is, that person from your like best power and best self. I think that is part of the first step, is just imagining, if this relationship does not continue, who do I want to be going forward? Who am I? What pieces of me are lost? Where is my power? And then actioning those things every day. That it's about action before thinking too, I think. So it's like, what would that person do? Right now, I don't even know what to do because I'm lost in this relationship and I'm constantly consumed on this side. But what would that person do? They would go into their husband's office at noon and see if they want to have a quickie or something, right? Like, what are the action steps that that person that you envision yourself to be in your strongest self, what would they do? Right?
Yeah.
They would probably
Alignment.
ignore the fact that their husband's upset and go and play tennis because they want to, and because that person would make their own choices and they wouldn't be dictated constantly thinking, what does he want me to do? What won't upset him? Or I think those things, and then you just have to do them, like start to action them before you even feel them to be real in your body. Action precedes thinking.
Well, I think what's interesting is like the example of I'm just going to go to tennis instead of sitting here trying to convince my partner to, to give up on this or to change their perspective. I'm just going to go and do me. That's a great example of like, it's pretty clear to go and do it, but most people still wouldn't. And I think at the core of that is this worry that like, what do you worry would happen if you went to go and play tennis? And I think that's an important piece to kind of get to is like, what am I projecting out, right? Like, for example, maybe you're worried that the argument is just going to get worse if you just leave. Mm-hmm. And it's going to take a lot longer. Okay, so if you're worried about that, what that means is that you're committed to being somebody who can repair conflict quickly or doesn't have much conflict at all. The bigger assumption here is if you go and take space for yourself, that it's going to make conflicts worse. Well, that's a pretty big assumption. So to your point of going to do it, go and play. Mm-hmm. Go and actually place a small bet. So I think sometimes there's this, like, it's important to frame that doing piece as like, it's an experiment. I already know what's going to happen if I stay. I know what's going to happen if I stay. Mm-hmm. Been in that movie before. And I think that's where a lot of people have an opportunity to actually experience something different is by not making it as a choice of from now on, I'm always going to go and play tennis and I'm just leaving any argument that we have here. It's no, what am I? I'm going to go and do it anyway and see if it comes true. Because over time, I think what starts to happen is that grip starts to loosen itself up a little bit. And we start to, after going to tennis once or twice, we realize, oh, wow, my worst case scenario didn't actually come to fruition. Actually, when I gave Dave space, it was really great. As soon as I came home, I got a great workout in. And he actually came to me with his perspective now that I had left on that. And wow, this is actually better than I thought it was. But most people don't actually have the experience of going to do it, right? And I think framing it as just like, it's a bet. It's a small bet. Not to trivialize the intensity of the emotion that sometimes we're met around that. But I think we have to experience that. I really do.
And to add to that, sometimes you get exactly what you expected. But suddenly, I'm a person who's okay with you being uncomfortable or irritable. And that's not going to throw off my whole day, right? Like that, that is a choice too, to be like, I'm making this choice for myself. And now I'm going to push into it a little more. And I'm going to see what happens if instead of trying to repair this right away, I just go and get my work done. And then I go pick up the kids and I just move on. And I just allow you to be in whatever state you're bothered or not, like sometimes it's exactly what you expect, but it's the reaction to that expectation that has created this loop in your relationship too, that it's like, this is always what happens. I get, powerful and I go do what I want, but then you're upset. And then I come back and I'm like, oh no, now you're upset. Now I have to fix this. This is way more work. I should have just not gone to tennis in the first place because now this is a huge output for me instead of something fun. But there is other alternatives. There is other options there too, where you can choose to be a person who's like, you know what? That's you. That's how you're feeling. And okay, I'm not feeling like that. I'm going to go over here.
Yeah. And I think you have a really good ability, Jen, to be able to be rather introspective on those types. And when I think about Lisa's question here, I think any changes I've made around like how I want to be, I've typically approached them a bit differently. If I think back to one of the challenges we were having and how we were dealing with thirds, in particular, our daughter at one point in time years ago. And you'll remember that I had and I wasn't willing to back down on it. And where we had come to was, I remember we brought up Jason Gaddis from the relationship school and we took him out for dinner. And I remember after having a cocktail and sitting down with him, I said, okay, so I think I'm right on this. Can you please prove me wrong? Or show me where I think I'm wrong on this. And I'm just sharing this as an alternative way of looking at like how I've come to making some of these changes is you're very good at introspectively kind of getting there on your own. I, for whatever reason, need to be challenged or have an side perspective. And since the dynamic is typically between me and you, or if it was between me and Lisa, as an example, like, I don't think getting that perspective from the person I'm in an argument with is going to be the best way to get it. I need to get it from somewhere else. So I think sometimes if you're feeling like I was kind of giving up on something or compromising something or holding on maybe too tightly to something and wanting something to be different, there's a lot of value for me in being able to say, okay, can we bring somebody and can you help me see what
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was so blown away by like how quick that third party perspective can help not just me, but also you see the situation differently as well, right? Again, inviting different possibilities or variation of the story that we're collectively telling about that moment. And I think whether it's going through divorce or trying to build skills in how you repair conflict in a outstanding relationship that you have, you're trying to get better at, bringing in somebody else is not a permanent decision. It can be something that's for a short period of time, but it will collapse time, right? It will accelerate your ability to, for Jen and I, we probably have, I don't even want to think about it actually. I was going to say, 50 more years together, hopefully, or 60 more life. I want to experience 55 or 60 of those years, 59 of those years in the healthiest possible state with you as it relates to the way we navigate those moments. So why wouldn't we bring somebody in to help us collapse time? Same thing for you, Lisa, you have somebody go through divorce. You're reinventing yourself after that. I met Jen 2 years into her reinvention. Wouldn't you want to live in that state of reinvention and clarity for a lot longer than taking 10 years to figure it out on your own? Like, there's something really magical about that. And Jen, you're so good at doing that on your own. I struggle with that, as reflective as I can be. And for me, I find what helps me get to these, wow, I need to change that, really is done quite well when I can bring in somebody else and say, here's where I think I'm right. I'm very certain. Please challenge me on this. And I think actively seeking that is also a really great signal to you as my partner to say, I'm willing to change, but I also am pretty strongly opinionated on this. And that's okay too. I think that's okay too, but it's a signal that I'm willing to be a student of this. I'm willing to entertain a different perspective and change my mind.
I love both of you sharing, and Jen is like experiment, but also keep your expectation in check if the other person doesn't meet where you wanted to experiment. But Dave is like have that third party perspective for him is helping him to see what he's missing. And as you were talking about right or wrong, Dave, I actually had this conversation and also had a lot of for my marriage is that, I was so wanting everything to be like, prove I am right. And in the end, I lost my marriage. So what the fuck is the point of being, if that's what I get, this morning when I dropped my son and at his camp, he kind of got a little bit agitated by me asking questions. He was like, I'm right. It's checking table is there, and I had a conversation with him like, honey, what's the point that you're giving me this attitude? Even if you're right, I'm not trying to argue with you whether you're right or wrong. Is the point I want to bring it to him. Is like the point is like, if being right damage our relationship, what's the point? Why wouldn't we do the introspection or having a third party coming to help us?
I think it's a good point you make around about being right. And I think the consequence of being right is that the person you were in your home, I often I can really relate to what you're saying because I'm somebody who likes to be right. And I feel like I am in a lot of moments, right? And what I've realized is when I'm fighting to be right, what happens is now my home is filled with people. And that is not the type of home that I want others to be able to experience. That is not the home that I want to be associated with my family name. A home filled with people who have been defeated. No. So would you rather be rich or right? Maybe not in the capital sense rich in intimacy, rich in connection, rich in trust, right? All these really important pieces. But I think that is something we often forget is that that is the consequence of being right. The consequence of being right is that you have a house.
It's a really interesting way to put it, but very true.
Yeah. And which brings me is that the first time I approached Dave, we had this really, I think both of us cried. And you told me that, Lisa, I'm doing this work with you, but for your kids. I think it just
I remember that. I remember that.
and
Yeah, wow. That brings you back. Yeah. Yeah, I
so
remember saying to you,
important.
Lisa, if we're going to do this work, I need you to know I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for your kids. So I'm going to, we're going to have moments where it's going to feel like I'm not working, but that we're approaching this where I'm actually working.
Yeah. So I'm just saying it's so important, the legacy we want to leave behind. And maybe in this case, you don't have kids, but for the people around you, and how do you want them to remember you? And I also want to just share that how I implement some of the tools that you mentioned that in this book. You talked about family boot camp. I was like, I'm a single mom. My kids are young. My mom doesn't speak English. How do I do that? But what I did was I did a check-in with my son. I was like, he's 9 years old. I can do that with him. Didn't know how it would go. I just like, hey, how are you? And we had a really good chat, and he blew me away. He said, Mom, I think we're thriving. I was like, are we? That's the goal that I
That's so cute.
when everything fell apart. So, it was very sudden that my ex said I don't want it, and then shortly after my daughter, he decided to disconnect fully with the kids as well. It's obviously a big trauma. So one thing that even though I was pregnant, I was just a mess. That once I got some strength, then I told my son at the time was 5 or 6. I said, "Hey, we're not only gonna survive this, we're going to thrive." And you never know what message sticks, right? And this is a year, 4 years later, he said, we're thriving and I'm really enjoying life. And it's so funny. This is what he surprised said. Oh, great. We had a great chat. And he checked in with me. It's like, hey, how are you doing? I was telling him about the things I'm doing. Like usually I wouldn't tell him. He was like, ooh. and in the end, this is the surprising part. I said, hey, Oliver, I like to do this checking with you often, like weekly if possible. And he said, well, I think that's too frequent. Let's do it, every 2 weeks. I'm sharing this is just like once you start to doing this, whatever Dave is in you, please, you can grab this book anywhere. Chief Family Officers, that you'll be surprised to, like Jen said, how the other people in your life can meet you in your family. So that's what I wanted to share, and how meaningful and important this work is to lead your family and to always look within. And I want to thank you both for sharing so truthfully and vulnerably. And before we wrap up, something that we didn't cover, you really want to send the message to people who are maybe struggling in their intimate relationship, whether it's a long-term relationship or a marriage, or maybe they're in the process of divorce.
Jen, anything?
Well, I just wanted to say one of the nicest compliments I ever got about parenting was, I remember a preschool teacher once said to me, it really seems like your daughter is a participating member of your family. And so I just want to give that compliment to you, Lisa. It really seems like your son is a participating member of your family with a voice and an opinion that he feels comfortable sharing. Like that is a high compliment to you as a parent. From the couple perspective, I feel like we've shared so much. But Dave, do you have something that jumps to mind?
I immediately feel called to start exactly what you did with Lisa. I think one of the really great things that I've had a chance, Lisa, to witness in you over having known you is, you model really good student behavior. I was in a cab ride down to the airport a few weeks ago, and the taxi driver goes to me, "Hey, you're an author on families and that. How do I convince my kids to take more ownership?" And I asked him, I was like, "Well, how do you do it that yourself?" He's like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Well, you have to show your kids what that looks like. Don't tell them that." Right. And I think you're a great example of opening up, being honest with your kids. Right. And I think more and more when it comes to these types of topics, and especially since we're talking about like the internal arts of families here, like this is not a science. This is not something that is a simple little math equation. It's very complex in human stuff. And what really required in that space is somebody who models by example and models really good student behavior. And I just see that so much in you. So thank you. And I think that's what I would encourage anybody listening to really just remind themselves about is like, am I modeling the things I'm asking my kids to do or I'm asking my partner to do? And making sure that's there. And lastly, I would say is just like, there's always going to be junctures in the journey of a family where you don't know what to do next. Those are always going to be there. And something that has never failed me in those moments is just asking, what would love do now? That to me is a question that always postures me, I think, correctly or resets me in those moments when things are difficult. And so that would be a closing comment for me is just like wherever you are in your journey as you're listening, is just asking that very sincerely, you know, what would love do now? What would the next right thing be if love were to answer that question? And I think that's a really great place to set as a foundation of which we can always go back to when things seem unclear and where we're going next.
I thought of what I want to share just to wrap up too, kind of adding on to that, Dave. I think everything we've talked about today required these moments of awareness where something shifts in the way that you're thinking, that allows for change, that allows for proactive conversations, whatever it is. What I would say is that you don't know what you don't know. Until you put yourself in situations to learn and grow, often you feel you're right, but you don't know what you don't know. You can't know what hasn't come to you yet. Picking up a book like Dave's book, working with a coach, even if you don't know what to work with, just like Dave said, like show me where I'm wrong, because I'm pretty confident that I'm right. Like whatever it is, anything, talk to friends or people who know, who've been through it, whatever it is, like you don't know, be open to knowing something that you don't know yet.
I love that. Always choose love and checking with how would you approach this with love, but always checking in with yourself as well, just being open because with that student mindset, I don't know what I don't know. And let's find out. And
exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much again. This is so awesome. And there are so many moments I just want to be like, yay! So many golden nuggets. And I was like, oh, my clients need to hear this. And whoever is in a rough spot in their relationship need to hear this. Thank you again so much. And you can pick up Dave's book, The Chief Family Officer, anywhere in the bookstore or online. And thank you so much for your time and to share. And, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you for having us,
Bye, Lisa.
Bye for now.